something to give me an alert because I'm terrible about forgetting crap.
We're live. I'm not picky. Um, Sorry about that. I should have waited a sec. But this is my guest, Eddie Brute Facts. Tell us about your channel real quick.
Yes. So I do typically philosophy of religion, but I do have academics of all kinds, historians. It's more of a laid back style kind of show. Originally, it was more about getting to know more about the philosophers behind the work. Um, but I've noticed that that doesn't get a whole lot of people's attention. So I've been spending more time actually on content and producing actually a series on epistemology right now.
Right on. What have you been? What's been your latest? Uh, uh, have you changed your position? I should say, or anything on anything, or have you learned
Uh,
something you didn't know before, or anything like that?
yeah, I try to be as objective as possible, and I think too many theists hold on to too many traditional positions that theists hold, and die on hills that they shouldn't. You know, while I'm tentatively a moral realist, I was a very confident moral realist at one time, but I don't think that moral realism necessarily, um, theism doesn't hinge on moral realism being true. Things, there's been.
Wow, that's an interesting claim. I would resist that very heavily, but
I know that's the initial reaction that that a lot of people get, but also, I got as many. I try to spend as much time in the academic arguments and not as much on the
you're not
internet.
as biblical. What about the Bible though? Does that what's your position there? Because I would, if I go, I'm like a, like the Bible is like the touchstone for me. Like it's like if that falls, like I don't really know what to make of Christianity. Honestly, if I'm honest.
Yeah, well, so just a little bit of background. I came to um, theism, or back to theism, and ultimately Christianity through philosophy of religion and evidentialism. Now, I'm not going to make the bold claim that I investigated all these things and all this evidence, and I decided, hey, God is real and Jesus is God. I most definitely would say that it was pretty much all God's doing. Um, I don't think anybody on their own distorted, corrupted view of the world could just come to the decision that God exists and that Jesus is from God. But it was investigating the arguments for the resurrection of Jesus that gave me a confidence in Christianity being true. And I came back to being confident that Christianity is true through evaluating those arguments. And as the topic is tonight, the study in typology um, really solidified my confidence in Christianity being true.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that. But there's a lot of people streaming right now. I'm sure people will eventually start showing up here. But let me tell you why I feel like why I've recently concluded why moral realism has to be true. Not and when I say I guess I shouldn't say has to be true, but the I would argue for me like the moral law of God. It kind of like God's godhood depends on it because like the youth throw dilemma. To me, the only real good answer for that would be God's moral laws are what they are because of who He is, and it's kind of like almost even like a theism seems like that would be required for Him to be God. Like His morals would have to be, you know, not just arbitrary in any way, and then they wouldn't be able to change. And so, the only answer to the Euthyphro dilemma is that morals are what they are because of God being the creator and the basis of all things
Well,
that exist.
I'm gonna disagree. The Euthyphro dilemma is misunderstood by a lot of theists and atheists. They forget the context of the Euthyphro, and the Euthyphro was in the context of um, polytheism, and the only success of the Euthyphro against any kind of theistic ethical system is against strict traditional divine command theory. It doesn't affect modified divine command theory. It doesn't affect any other moral realist or objectivist positions of morality. And so here's the thing: um, when when I say that I hold tentatively to moral realism, what I mean is there. I don't disagree that there are moral facts. And the reason that I'm still in the realism camp is because I can look at the world and I can say, yes, all of these, extreme situations that are used as examples in philosophy, like, you should never torture somebody for the fun of it. And I'm not going to go into the more vivid ones. Yes, I think we can all agree that there is something truly wrong with that. But once we start parsing that down and we're getting more into the normative ethics and out of the meta ethical, then or applied ethics, within that line starts to get fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier. So while we can say, yeah, it seems to be the case clearly on these extreme situations, well, it would want I would want to say there should be plenty of non-extreme situations that we agree is objectively wrong across the board. And that's where the fuzziness comes in. Um, I will say that regardless of what ethical or meta ethical system somebody holds to, I still I don't think it affects God, even if I was, an anti realist. I don't think it affects the fact that God exists and he's a source of morals, because one could very well say, while it seems to be my opinion, we still have to explain, quote unquote, the problem of good. Even if moral realism isn't true, how do you explain good or goodness in a purely naturalistic world? You just can't. You have to just appeal to some kind of evolutionary or supervenience theory or something like that, which really doesn't explain anything. It's just kind of going back and saying, oh, evolution. Well, there doesn't seem to be any purpose for morals to, for survival. In fact, it seems to be the opposite. If we killed all of our rivals and had all of the resources to ourselves, that would be what is conducive to, surviving given evolution. So I just don't, regardless if one is a realist or an anti-realist or anywhere in between those, I still think we have a problem of good, and it can only be explained by God existing.
Yeah, the weight of just the apparent reality of day to day life seems to me is enough to make somebody stop and think. I mean, I think I would be a moral realist. I don't know. It depends on what mood I'm in, I guess. I feel like moral realism requires God, but then other depends on what angle I'm coming at it from. I tend to think, well, it almost seems like at least like an evidentiary defense of moral realism seems like it has to come from God, but like just the notion that of everyday life. There really seems like stuff's wrong, and that seems like that could be the case without God to me. But I think to ultimately like put some feet on it or whatever, ground it or whatever, it would be seems like you need God. That's just where I'm coming from. But I hear what you're saying. For me, it's like it seems problematic. Yeah, like you said, if it's divine command theory seems arbitrary, although I do like some of the modified ones, and I even would suggest maybe that I think that I might be one of those. Because, like, in some sense, whatever God says you trust as being moral, maybe that's not divine command theory, but like you can operate under that way of thinking and be in good shape, I would say, as a believer or a Christian. Um, but is there anything else you want to say about that? Or I don't have a
No,
great
that's
grasp
yeah,
on
yeah.
all of that.
We could actually come back and do a show on that.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be fun. It's
So
kind of the hot topic lately, but in
yeah.
my circles anyway. But so what verses would you like? I would appeal to Isaiah 46 or 44 through 50, basically all in there. When all the things God's saying through Isaiah there to appeal to this typology. My favorite typology, anyways. And I would even have I have some weird verses that I would even point to that some that
Wait
aren't
a minute. What was the Isaiah? The Are you talking about the messianic, the suffering
no
servant?
the no no this is it's called the challenge of the to the false gods. God's declaring himself to be the true God,
Which
and
which chapter?
I can
Because
pull
the reason I'm asking is, with a lot of the typology that I'm familiar with, I don't remember
you don't need
Isaiah.
it first, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm just saying, like, this principle, you can kind of like, I appeal to this verse as to go along with some typology that's kind of some that people don't recognize often, although
Oh,
it's
okay.
in early church father writings. They do mention it, many of them. Um, but I actually came to it on my own and then found out later that they had said a similar thing. I mean, you touched on it last time. I'm just saying it's kind of interesting that, like, let's see. Remember the former things of God, for I'm God, there's none else. I'm God, and there's no one like me. Remember this, show yourself men. And then it goes on, and he says that it does the challenge to the false gods. He declares himself. I am God, who says things happen before they do, sort of thing. That whole piece, maybe you're not familiar with it. Most people like know this verse as being like, he says he makes fun of the gods. He's describing an idol worshiper, like Bel boweth down, Nebo stoopeth over. They cut a piece of wood and burn it and cook their dinner, and then they carve a idol out of the other half, and they bow down to it. It's like how pathetic it is. And he's like, "Can your idols do this? Can your idols do that? I do, though. I predict things and tell you before they happen." And so, and then you look at Genesis, and it's kind of interesting how it follows that pattern of events in history. Like one didn't mention, I'll just to start us off, I would say when you look at those days of creation and you look at the typology of Christ in the Bible, the Son typology, I would say he comes right at that period, at like the fourth day, and he's like the Son, and like how like Heiser. I don't know if you're into the whole like.
Oh, I
Um,
love Heiser. I'm
okay, so
listening
you're
to one of his audiobooks now.
Psalm
Demons.
Psalm 82, like the whole divine counsel idea.
Yeah, he's uh, one of the few proponents today of the divine council
Yeah.
idea.
So
Yeah, he's
what are the angels metaphorically likened to in the sky? The stars, right?
yeah, yeah,
Right. And so and we're replacing the ones that are fallen on the divine council, right?
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So like, what does he tell Abraham? Like, look up at the stars, count them if you can, sort of thing. And he's like,
Hmm.
thus will your children be. God says, I know all the stars by name. He says, and then even in Revelation, you see them on the sea of glass, like up in the sky kind of thing. And like at the very end. And in Daniel, it says, many who will sleep in the dust shall rise, and the wise ones will have everlasting life, and they'll shine like the stars in heaven forever. So it's all
Right.
through the apocalyptic literature, the star idea. And in Genesis, what does it say? He made the great light, and like the lesser light would come first, like the moon, and that's involved with all the messianic property. And like John would be like that, right? By the way, he's born exactly one half of a year before Christ, and he makes way for the right for baptism of
Hmm.
repentance, and then he baptizes Jesus, and it's like he's the great light, and then it like almost as an addition in that chapter of Genesis or that verse, it says, and then scholars have like noted that it seems like somebody added this in at the end, like a little addition. He made the stars also, like after the sun comes. And I just find that interesting. And it's like the second half of Genesis does that. It's he's after the sun comes, God fills all the environments with living creatures, swarms of living creatures, and then it culminates in the wedding of Adam and Eve. And Jesus, Adam eating the fruit to be like, to stay with his bride who fell.
Right. Yeah. So one of the ones that really um, really uh, got my attention was the typology of Moses and Jesus. Um, the I mean, uh, pretty much most of the book of Matthew is about typologies of Jesus and Moses. Um, there's Matthew 2:16, 2:13, 2:13 through 15, 14, 125. I mean it's crazy. So uh if you'd like, I'll go through all of the
Yeah, if you want
similarities.
to share your
Yeah.
screen if anything, I'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, well, these are in my notes. I don't have them on the screen um at the moment, but I'll I can
No,
find
that's fine.
where. Yeah,
Just
I can find. Yeah, I can give you the link later to put in the description where I got a lot of these from. Um, but we have, so with Moses and Jesus. So Moses, he was born under the evil king Pharaoh, who tried to kill him as a child, a baby. King Herod tried to kill Jesus as a baby. Um, Moses was hidden from Pharaoh. Uh, Jesus and his family obviously was escaped to get away from King Herod. He was hidden. Moses was saved by women and his mother, Miriam, Pharaoh's daughter. Jesus was saved and helped by his mother Mary. Pharaoh's daughter adopted Moses. Joseph adopted Jesus. Moses became Prince of Egypt. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Uh, long period of silence from childhood to adulthood with Moses. Same thing with Jesus. Moses had a secret identity. Jesus did too, which was the messianic secret. Um, Moses tried to save his Hebrew kinsman. Jesus came to save his Hebrew kinsman first. Moses went from being a prince to a pauper. Jesus went from being God to being a man. Moses saved a woman at the well. Jesus saved a woman at the well. Of course, that one's possibly later entered into scripture. But Moses became a shepherd. Jesus is referred to as a good shepherd. Moses' mission was to redeem Israel from slavery in Egypt. Jesus's mission is to redeem mankind from slavery to sin. Moses was loved and supported in his ministry by his sister Miriam. Jesus was loved and supported in his ministry by his mother Mary, which is in Hebrew Miriam. He was Moses was often rejected by his own people. Jesus often rejected by his own people. Moses gave God's law on the mountain of Sinai. Jesus gave the new law from the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. Moses
Eddie,
spent.
Eddie, wait a second. So my friend Nadimos here, he was like hopefully he'll come in because this will be interesting because
Mhm.
these types of coincidences I just want to mention because I know you're cool with atheists too. Like, just want to point out real fast, but then you keep going. But like, he found these coincidences and things like that. I kind of get the feeling that these are the kind of things that made him think it was false, like it was made up.
Mm.
So we want to,
Well,
I do we want to get into that after you're done doing this.
yeah,
Talking.
absolutely. Well, I've only got a couple of more, a few more, and then that's an excellent point because this is something that made me step back and go, hmm. So we have Moses spent 40 days fasting on the mountain. Jesus spent 40 days fasting in the desert. Moses performed signs and miracles. Jesus performed signs and miracles. Moses offered his life for salvation for his people after the sin of the golden calf. Jesus offered his life for salvation of the world. Moses is the prophet of the old covenant church. Jesus is the prophet, the priest, and the king of the everlasting covenant of the new church. There is just phenomenal amount of types and shadows. Now, here's the accusation, and it's not an untrue accusation. Matthew was absolutely trying to show that Jesus was like Moses but greater, because to the Jewish, Moses was one of the greatest prophets, and the coming Messiah was supposed to be the greatest prophet. And Matthew is often, called the Jewish gospel, and a lot of the critics try to say that he was, anti-Semitic, but that's not true at all. Um, it's very Jewish in the sense that he understood who the Jewish Messiah was supposed to be, and Jesus didn't seem to fit that um, when given his ministry. And Matthew is intentionally trying to show that Jesus is the new Moses, but this is something that is attested to by multiple gospels, multiple other books in the New Testament. A lot of these are attested by Paul, even the early church fathers, Polycarp, Ignatius, Clement of Rome. These are all. So it's not like Matthew was the first to grab all of these similarities and throw them all in a book to say, hey, look, this is who Jesus is. Look, believe me, he's the Messiah, because this is something that was well accepted by all of the early Christians, given the fact that, they think that Mark was given Mark in priority. We have Mark that's first, and then I think it's Matthew and then Luke, and then some say Luke and Matthew. But none of these of what Jesus, in fact, you can look at the Sermon on the Mount and you can find it in the multiple gospels. You can find almost everything that Matthew states here is in other gospels too. So it's not like
I
he
think
just made it all up himself to try and prove that Jesus was the Messiah.
yeah, I think he's yeah, I think it's well, I think that was their intention, and that's fine. I would say, like, because I mean, it's promised that God would send a prophet like Moses, right? So like,
Hmm.
and I think Matthew's trying to show that he is this one, and he's just trying to show all the evidence that would suggest that this is him. And so it's not like an obsessive false thing. It's like showing all the ways that is the case. Now, here's my friend I was talking about. He's here, so I didn't say his position quite
Hey,
right, so I want to let him. Hey, what's up, man?
no,
Please.
I actually have no problem with um, the idea of a progressive revelation and um, typology being a legitimate means to reveal uh, the true Messiah for mankind. I don't have much of an issue with that. So those kinds of connections that Eddie was listing off, my Christian self would certainly be like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." Um, but now in the position I am, and rethinking things, um, it's a little bit different. But that's totally fine.
I guess I was thinking of like how. Well, I guess I was just thinking this relates in the sense of like how stories like how would you look at this now? Like, were they making up stories to make it fit with Moses? Because I know you don't think it's all historical. So like,
Right.
I'm trying to think of like a good way to like go through and think about that. But like, could it just be the case that there's so many little detailed stories you could point to? Like, it's just not going to be that much out of possibility to for the you're going to just get some hits. And you mix that
Hmm.
with like false, like you were, I forget what fallacy you called it, the sharpshooter's fallacy or whatever. Or I mean,
Yeah, my own channel, right? Like the
Texas
Texas
sharpshooter
sharpshooter
fallacy.
fallacy, right? Like that. It's not improbable that we here. I actually maybe can do this with
I've always thought there
what
could be
little I
something.
know about Eddie. Ready? Eddie, you're an American, right?
As far as I know.
Okay, good, good, good. You're married, right?
As far as I know.
Cool. You've had at least a kid, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, 3 times.
3 times. Great. Um, you are married and only have been married to one woman.
Yes.
Sweet. You're from somewhere not too far from the Midwest.
Right.
Okay. So now let's fast forward 1,000 years and write quote unquote 40-year removed historical accounts of both of ourselves, and now ask someone 1,000 years removed from us to tell the differences between us. I bet you if those were the only details that we had present for both of our stories,
Hmm.
they'd be like, isn't there a possibility that they're the same person? Right? Or like maybe someone recounting Eddie's life knew about Nick's life. And they just copied elements of Nick's life and made him this more prominent YouTuber.
So,
Right? But so the person 1,000 years back, or sorry, 1,000 years forward, is committing the sharpshooter fallacy. We're both unique people, right? But we have all these similar details to us, um, to one another, but that doesn't necessarily make us equal, right? And I don't want to be guilty of that in the idea of like mimesis or actual other his contemporaneous historical figures to Jesus. And that was the point of my stream that I did last night. I
well,
don't
Will you
so
define
expect
that
that
for the
you watch
audience?
us.
what exactly are you calling the sharpshooter fallacy?
Right. So it would be saying like it's more than a coincidence here that there's something supernatural or freaky about the fact that your life and my life, if we removed ourselves 1,000 years from it and then looked backwards and found these all these matching details, like the sharpshooter fallacy is basically like, isn't it freaky? Isn't it odd? Isn't it um, some kind of prophecy or like supernatural thing that these two things line up so much, even though we can't disprove the fact that they are actually different people. You're trying to narrow in on a target that actually doesn't exist.
Yeah,
That's the sharpshooter
I'm going to
fallacy.
disagree with your
Really?
understanding of the sharpshooter fallacy. Yeah, because the sharpshooter fallacy, the most pertinent part of that is ignoring evidence to the contrary. So, with the sharpshooter fallacy, you're taking a body of evidence
Hmm.
and you're trying to fit this body of evidence into a specific idea that you have and ignore the counter evidence to it. And that's an important part of it. But even
Oh,
more,
okay. Sure.
it's an informal fallacy. It doesn't mean the conclusion's false.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, it's an error in reasoning, but to conclude that the conclusion is false because of an error in reasoning and informal is actually the fallacy. So while we can point out that there's an error in reasoning, it doesn't follow that the conclusion is false. Now,
Right.
I would say the fact that Jesus actually did not fit any mold or any idea of the Jewish Messiah, um, the fact that these people came to believe that he was the Messiah is a testament to his ministry and possibly the miraculous things that he did, because the Jewish Messiah was supposed to be a political and military leader, and he was supposed to come and deliver Israel and then deliver the world through Israel. And that's the reason that you see when Peter says, when Jesus is telling him it's appointed for the Son of Man to die, and Peter says, far be it from me that you would die, while I'm with you. And Jesus tells him, get thee behind me, Satan, because he's trying to thwart the plan of God, because they thought he was going to overthrow Rome and Jerusalem.
Right.
And that's the reason that the apostles were arguing about who's going to sit at the right hand. And Jesus told them, you know not what you ask. And the rebuff in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Peter lashed out, at least in one of the accounts, and cut the ear off of the Roman guards that came in, this because it was the plan of God, and they did not. That's what Jesus told him. He said, how long do I have to be with y'all? because they just didn't understand. They literally thought he was going to go into Jerusalem and cast out Rome and set up his kingdom because
Even
he was
after he died.
convinced. Because he was convinced, they were convinced he was the Messiah. Because something that he did along the way convinced them that he was the Messiah. And that was the reason that when they took him to trial and were trying to kill him, all of them scattered because that wasn't part of the plan. And then once Jesus was killed, that's the whole reason they were in the house pouting and crying and freaking out, because the guy who was supposed to throw Rome out and they were going to sit beside him, he was going to be the Messiah, is dead. So everything that they had done for all that time leading up to his death seemed to be for nothing. And that's
Rather
why Thomas,
sophisticated fiction. Rather sophisticated fiction, if that were the case, compared to other.
well, that's why, well, if you look at it, I mean, if you understand it from this perspective, that's why Thomas doubted, because the resurrection for the Jewish who believed in resurrections was at the end of time. It wasn't necessarily the Messiah dying and being resurrected. So they had no reason whatsoever to even continue their mission, continue on with spreading the church or anything. They were done. They were defeated. Their guy was dead. But then something else happened, and they thought that they had seen Jesus. And that's when they were reinvigorated and went throughout all of the land around the Mediterranean preaching this gospel, because they believed they saw Jesus after he had died. And they had no other reason to continue on with that.
I literally thought I saw Elvis in Fort Wayne a few weeks ago. Just saying. I'm just
Are
busting
you
your
willing?
balls.
Are you willing to die for that? Are you willing to die for that? I like
For Elvis?
too.
I don't know. Maybe.
No. Well, what do you think? What do you think, Nidimos? I mean, that is. I find that rather implausible. Like these are like principles of embarrassment. Like this.
Yeah, when you look at the internal evidence and you understand the Jewish perspective, the Second Temple Judaism, and what they expect. Now, it is true that a lot of Jews at the time, most of them, were looking for a Messiah. They thought that, because of the oppression of Rome and everything, is like this has to be the time of the Messiah. In fact,
based on
Jesus,
Daniel.
yeah, well, in fact, Jesus wasn't even hated for being called the Messiah, because there were multiple candidates for the Messiah who they thought was the Messiah. But he ended up stirring up enough shit that he caught the attention, of the Sanhedrin and the Roman authorities, who didn't want, unrest. And that's why he ended up paying the ultimate price. But if we look at the internal evidence about, and we understand from their point of view, what Jesus was not even supposed to fit the mold. He was nothing like what the Second Temple Jews or Pharisaic, mostly Pharisaic Jews. The Essenes were more distant, and the Sadducees were like temple elite that were, they very, very conservative. They only held to the oral Torah, written Torah.
I would
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would. So to answer Jamie's question, from where I'm sitting right now, I see that I feel that you are making an assumption that there are three at least mainline interpretations or expressions of Yahweh worship or Judaism and textual traditions amongst those Jews. Whereas the position I'm in, I feel like that I've seen that, and it's, I think, based on modern history and Christendom, right? Like we all, I hope, on the stream right now would agree that there are way more than three interpretations. Maybe some of them in minor points and some of them in major points of Christendom itself. So to go back into history and assume that most of the people who were intrigued or trying to adhere to Yahweh worship or Judaism, we're all the same as one another, I think is a bit difficult if you assume that we were all made in the image of God, and are intrinsically the same from the age of Adam until now. So those first century peoples, right, to assume that they all had, especially the educated ones, had the same views of Yahweh worship, the temple, its relevance, what the Messiah would be, how he would come about, and things like that, to assume that could fit into very distinct categories for each person or educated person or potential scripture writer, I think
So,
is a bit of a historical overreach
so
based
what?
on our lived experience of
Well, that's actually a good
things like
point.
that.
Because the Jews really didn't do theology. They weren't. They were more about the major splits were about which tradition and rabbis that they followed. So you had the Pharisees who followed the written Torah and the oral Torah, and they believed that both were inspired by God. And then the Sadducees were strictly written Torah only, and the Essenes were more apocalyptic and actually taught a lot more along the lines of what Jesus did. Um, but they were so hung up on the apocalypse that when Rome, the destruction of the temple in AD 70, when Rome invaded Jerusalem, they thought that was the coming apocalypse, and they all took up swords and fought Rome, which killed out the Essenes. Because they thought it, but you're right. So all it required at that time. So the tradition of Judaism is to debate. That is what the tradition is. That's why you have this
Aha, okay,
long
I get what you're saying.
history of rabbinic thought. It is to debate, and so the oldest tradition in Judaism, they actually believe that God is imperfect and creation is imperfect. And through creation and our participation, we're helping God to be perfect. That's why so many,
Wow, I did not
right?
know that.
Absolutely. It's
I
so,
think though you would frustrate a lot of Christians
I've
who
heard
might
that.
hear that.
I've
well,
heard that.
actually, right. So that's,
Eddie does
so,
frustrate a lot of Christians.
oh,
I
I
think
see.
they
Yeah.
mean it in a different way. I think they mean that in a different way than a Christian might hear that, as far
Right.
as
Well,
making that perfect.
Well, I
to
don't
them,
know.
it's a greater, compliment that God would include us in
Yes.
this creation that was imperfect for us. And I mean, you got everything from secular Judaism and ultra conservative Judaism of Torah to all the way to Kabbalists, which are super mystic. And but that's the thing. So that's what the whole scripture means when Jesus says, when two or more are gathered in my name, I am there with you. Well, that is a direct play on how they studied Torah in the temple. They would take one student who would present a verse, and then the other two students would debate every possible meaning of that verse. And what Jesus was saying was, where two or more you are gathered, talking or debating God's word, then I am with you. God's word, the Logos, I am there with you. And it was a direct play on the Jewish practices at the time. But that's one thing that is very clear about Judaism, is that if people think that the denominational fracturing of Christianity is something, they have no idea when they get to Judaism, because they are all over the place.
Well,
But
then I had no idea.
but there is important factors to be considered a Jew. You had to be a monotheist. You had to believe in Yahweh. You had to believe in the Torah, at least the written Torah. And you had to practice at least the written Torah. And that was really the only requirements. That's why all of them, the Essenes, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, all of them were allowed to go to the temple and worship and do their sacrifices and everything because they met the minimum requirements, because it's not really a theological thing. In fact, Paul invented Christian theology because theology wasn't a thing in Judaism. It was more historic in practice, is what it was to the Jews at the time, and traditionally the Jews.
Wow.
And just for the record, I'm not an expert. I've just spent the last year like super studying early Christianity, Second Temple Judaism, and traditional
Hey,
Judaism.
Not
good
an
on you
expert,
for
but
doing
he
that at
plays one
all.
on YouTube.
Like,
Okay.
I'm just here for
I
the
know
comic relief.
believers that aren't open to even doing that, right? Because they might subconsciously know that might introduce more doubts and questions, so they're not going to do that.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with my story, I grew up very fundamentalist and legalistic at a real young age, and then I also grew up in the hood, so I became like an apatheist. I just didn't care about God, and
Sure.
it wasn't until I was a young adult when I got married and had a kid and started, the kind of existential questions and things like that. And we went back to the only church I knew, which was the fundamentalist church. And they, being somebody who loves science and things like that, there were so many things they were teaching and the way they were teaching it and burdens they were putting on people that just you couldn't carry. And I ended up deconstructing and became an agnostic. And I wanted to know, and the reason I was agnostic and not strong atheist was I just had an intuition that God or something like a God or an intelligence or something existed behind all of reality. And so I ended up in philosophy of religion, and through philosophy of religion, I actually came more comfortable in theism and then ultimately Christianity. And coming to it from more of an evidential basis, I don't give two damns about orthodoxy. And that pisses a lot of Christians off. I'm more concerned with the time between, or first the Jewish background to Jesus and who he was, and then that 300-year period before the Council of Nicaea, before the church really got a hold of everything.
Right.
And so there's a lot of positions I hold that are considered heretical, even though they're not technically heretical. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm the most unorthodox, probably heretical, mere Christian. If there's like C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity,
Right.
That's where I'm at.
That's cool. Thanks for telling me about that. I appreciate that. Welcome,
Richard. Kyle. So one thing I wanted to ask Nidibus really quick is, this is something I always think of, and I can't always think of these things on the spot, but like when you look at those little details about to me that seems so fanciful to think that they were able to make that up or something. I always thought like these details about is like, like when they use the principle of embarrassment, like I wonder what would you say about like all these facts? Like the narrative says he told them that he was going to have to go to die, and then yet they're still like, it like seems to be contradictory in the storyline. Like, didn't he just tell them that he was going to die, and now they're like saying now they're acting like he never said that, and like multiple times, and like, you think that was written back into the story, or how would you look at that as far as if you thought the story wasn't true? It just seems like really advanced fiction and literary, devices for that sort of thing. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know that much about it, but it seems like fiction you read back then in these kind of narratives of these kinds of stories with the kind of goals they had didn't sound like this. It just seems so. It seems like a narrative that's modified at least, right? I mean, what do you say? What do you make of that?
I mean, at face value, the idea of subversion of expectations, like if we try to frame it that way, that is actually common in a lot of different literary forms, even very ancient ones. So I think that's probably a legitimate way to look at it. You can disagree, and that's fine, but um, yeah, or maybe maybe the disciple, like what's to say that the author of like a Markan or Q document didn't view the disciples in their narrative illustrations of the Christ of Mashiach, um, didn't view the disciples as these kind of like lay Jews who had their own rudimentary understanding of the Messiah, but the higher Messiah understanding would result in like the Christ or the Jesus figure that we're going to present to you. Like
Okay, yeah,
I
that's
don't
fair.
know how we step away from that even being a possibility.
Yeah, exactly. You really can't rule anything out because it's history,
Yeah.
right? Like, but it does seem awfully conveniently well done without a lot of evidence of like, I mean, some people seems like a lot of the evidence for it being legendary is just kind of like, well, this is too much of this is just would have to be prophecy if it weren't so. So it's like that kind of muddies the water in a certain sense. Like, how would you ever know if it's too good to be true, then it's not, and if it's not too good to be true, then it's not evidence. It's like, give me evidence. I just need evidence that's not Christian. Well, any evidence that could be used for this Christianity is going to be Christianized as soon as they find it. So it's like that's like asking for a flying man or
Asking for a
something.
square circle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got one I could offer though that's Jewish on Christians that
Um,
don't believe in Jesus, but
sure. And the other thing that I want to say is oh shit, where was I going to go with this? Never mind. If I think of it, I'll say so. But
what, like you're
it,
not going to
it's
be convinced by any evidence. Basically, is that what you're going to say?
oh, shut your mouth, you.
I'm just playing, bro.
Um,
Just messing
yeah.
with
By the way,
You
I did
dirty
want to thank
heathen.
you on your channel for coming onto my channel because that was great, and I really appreciated you contributing to the discussion with Ethan and Rebecca.
Yeah, that was fun. And look, I'm
Good.
not going to always be going after you with like evidence, but what this show was planned for was to talk about typology. So, Eddie,
Yeah.
maybe you want to show some of the things that convinced you about
Sure. Yeah.
the Bible that got you to come back.
Said in the private chat that Eddie went to the bathroom.
Oh, okay, yeah. Kyle,
I do.
Yeah, Richard, give me a second because Kyle's been in for a while and he hasn't had a chance to say anything. So, hi, Kyle. Never
Oh,
met you before.
good to meet you. I'm Kyle, agnostic atheist.
Okay.
Me and Eddie go back and forth all the time. We're pretty good pals about that. I do have a question. So, do you find anything wrong with the idea of a cyclic universe, one such that goes through these cycles of expansion and contraction throughout the eons?
I haven't thought about it much, but from what I've been told, is it's got problems. But I don't know if there's been any developments in it. But I mean, I can imagine off the cuff, like maybe it's possible. I mean, is that kind of what isn't that what Penrose kind of
Yes,
thinking?
Roger Penrose first coined the CCC model of conformal cyclic cosmology.
Yeah, I
Which
do
is,
appreciate his mind quite a bit actually. I think I like the way he thinks, and he's very smart.
and you were right. There's a problem, and the problem is called dark energy. So the universe is expanding at an accelerated rate, which I'm sure you've heard before, and it doesn't appear to be the case that the universe is going to recollapse. So we might have what's called a runaway universe, where it expands forever. And the obvious question is, well, what's it expanding into? And that's the cool thing about a fourth dimensional universe is that it can expand into itself. Space itself can literally just stretch, and it'll do that seemingly forever. But there is a margin of error in our calculations that show that it could recollapse. And if that's the case, it would do this in a continuous cycle forever.
And that's why I'm not a big fan of the Kalam. I like Aristotle's unmoved mover and Aquinas's pure act because neither one of them rely on the beginning of the universe, and in fact are compatible with either a cyclic universe or an eternal universe, and because they're basically metaphysical principles. So even if we say, yeah, we can run back, Newtonian physics back to a certain point, uh, which originally was, called the singularity, but most kind of deny that definition now, um, and refer to it as the initial expansion, because I think the one of the more popular theories is there was a pre-expansion to the large expansion. But
Yes.
what uh, you know, the question is, why at that time did, and I hate using temporal terms to talk about pre-temporality, but
Yeah.
yeah, it gets
That's a
real
bitch, isn't it?
confusing. But why did it expand then and not, let's say a trillion years ago or something? Even if it was, let's say we have quantum field theory is true, and we have these quantum fluctuations, and uh,
Well,
this.
let me correct you real quick. It's not that if it's true, it is true. That's why your phone works off of like electron theory.
Well, there are people that there are scientists that argue against field theory, quantum field theory.
I'm sure there
Um,
are.
but yeah, it's the most popular view. So we'll say, let's say quantum field theory is true, and we have these quantum fluctuations, and then how long has these quantum fluctuations been going on? Where did
Well,
where did the quantum field come from? Where did the
the
fundamental
the
particles come
way
from?
sorry,
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna, the way you phrased that. It said you said oh goodness, I'm losing my train of thought here. You said um, something about when or where did this happen,
No,
like these quantum
how long?
fluctuations, or
Yeah, how
how
long
long? Yeah,
has
okay.
yeah, how long have we had quantum the quantum field with these quantum fluctuations that led
Right.
to the initial expansion?
It's a little weird to talk about because things on the quantum level don't necessarily act like anything else.
Right,
Like it's
right,
a bit um it's hard, just like you said, it's hard to use temporal terms to describe the quantum because it goes
right.
against our intuitions.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and that's, I mean, it is. It really gets confusing, especially if somebody is familiar with, quantum theories. The Everett or many worlds, the Copenhagen,
Yeah.
Bowman, all these different interpretations. But so
And keep in
let's.
mind, I'm not a physicist. For everyone on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
panel, I just like to. I have a science-based YouTube channel that surrounds space science, and I'm heavily into that kind of thing. So
Yeah. So when I use, okay, so let's say we have the quantum field, um, and we have fundamental particles in this quantum field, and there's these quantum fluctuations, and so I can word it the best. Would you say you hold to the Everettian model, the many worlds hypothesis?
uh, I'm not entirely certain about that, actually, which I guess goes into the whole uncertainty principle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. See, the Copenhagen interpretation, the the many worlds. I call it hypothesis because it's not necessarily a theory.
Right.
Um, I don't know. It's
Well, the reason I was asking is because now, in the philosophy of science, especially in philosophy of quantum mechanics,
Mhm.
there are realist and anti-realist positions in the Everettian model. So the realists would say the many worlds hypothesis, they are real universes or worlds that exist and there's all these possibilities, and uh, uh, the wave function collapse or the particle is actually going in and out of different universes, while the anti-realists would say no, it's just a useful way of thinking about what's going on with the particle, which they confuse me the most, because it's like, if it's, where is the
Actually,
particle going then, if we're just using it as a way to think about it?
well, the thing
Here's
about
your
particles is they're
opinion
not.
whenever you want.
Oh, my bad.
As soon as they're done with this,
I'll just wrap it up real quick. From my understanding, particles are just excitations in the quantum fields. They aren't physical properties themselves.
Yes, they are massless. So okay, let's put it at this point. They are contingent things. The quantum field is contingent, the particles are contingent, the fluctuations are contingent. So,
are we sure the quantum field isn't necessary?
Well, it can't be, because we can think of the quantum field being differently. There's no necessary reason to why it is the way it is. So without using temporal terms, I can really only, to stop from being confusing, I can only go back to, they are contingent. I mean, there's no reason it's necessary that it's the way it is. I mean, we can think of quantum fields being different. We can think of the particles being different. We can think of.
I could think of God being different.
You can, right? But that's God. Even though you can think of God being so, it's the contingency and necessity is not saying that therefore God. So it's not that, okay, because these things are contingent, we have to have a God. And that wasn't my point. My point was that something necessarily has to exist. And I think the best position here is actually T-Jump's position. T-Jump holds that if there is a necessity or necessary something, then maybe it's a virtual particle, something that we have yet to discover. But the issue with that position is it's an appeal to possibilities. So it's not you're just saying it is possible that it's the case. Okay, well, you and I are now at the same level, and we're both looking for a metaphysical argument or a metaphysical reason that things are the way they are. And I would say, given all the other arguments for something like a God existing, would lean more heavily into the theistic camp as a virtual particle. You really, that's just one thing answering one question. There's
all right. Let me ask you one last question then. Do you think that energy itself is contingent on anything?
Energy is yeah, I do, because energy is just that which we call one state into another state. So it's contingent on the previous state. You got to remember now, the law of thermodynamics, the conservation of energy, is about a closed system. So if we're going to hold to the principle that energy cannot be created or destroyed, then we're going to have to, or let me think. So it's, we have the law of entropy, the law of conservation of energy, and what is the other? I'm drawing a blank right now. The three laws. Well, there's a fourth one, the zeroth law.
Conservation of energy.
Yeah, it's the
Conservation of
equilibrium.
momentum.
Yeah, basically everything's there's going to be a thermal equilibrium of everything. Well, saying that, first of all, we don't even know what energy is. We just give whatever it is that allows things to do work on certain levels is just what we call energy. And it is contingent because if we can have, let's say, a specific amount of energy at one position in one form, and we can have energy in a greater amount in another form, well, then that by definition is contingent because it's not the same amount, the same thing all the time. It's always changing. So
I'm following you.
You can have a lot of energy. So if energy was a necessary thing, then energy would have to stay the exact same measurement all the time, because any deviation from the maximum, or so you have the maximum or absolute zero, anything in between that is contingent. In other words, it could have been more or it could have been less. So if we have a measurement, go ahead.
Well, I'm drawing a blank on where I read this, but I did read that if you add up the positive mass energy of the universe with the negative gravitational energy of the universe, you add up to zero, making everything essentially nothing.
If you say that again one more time.
So if you take the positive mass energy of the universe with the negative gravitational energy of the universe, it adds up to zero. So no energy is being lost, no energy is being gained. The universe has basically a set amount of energy that doesn't change or deviate.
Right, but isn't that predicated on a closed system or an isolated system? Actually,
we aren't entirely sure if the universe is like enclosed upon itself or if it's flat in four dimensions.
That is a theory, not closed system, but an isolated system. That's in an isolated system, I believe, is the law of conservation of energy. So if there is a multiverse, then all of that goes out the window. Because
I'm not a big holder of the multiverse theory.
Yeah, well, you should be, because
I should be. Okay.
You should be, because
well, we can talk about that in private.
I think we've
I think Richard was wanting to talk.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, I'm always wanting to talk. Okay, so peace and respect to you all, first of all. Second of all, I have problems with everything everyone said since I've been here. Those were these following things. Eddie, how do you measure heresy, and how do you know that I'm not a greater heretic than you are? And so we need to develop a test for that. I think you asserted that having no test.
Okay, I was using the term hyperbolically, so you may be more of a heretic than I am.
I'm a literalist, so that doesn't really work for me. On the expanding universe, since the cosmic microwave background radiation at some distant point becomes so thick you can't see it, we can only see so far in the universe. So we don't even know how much of a sample of the universe is expanding if everything we're seeing is expanding, which we can't show. So much for the expanding universe. What if what we can see is 75% of the universe? What if it's 1/10 billionth? Is 1/10 billionth a good sample? And we have no way of knowing. Okay, so we don't even know how good our sample is.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Neil Tyson said. Like, you can take a cup of water from the ocean and examine it and say, well, there's no whales in here, so there's no whales in the ocean.
That's also there. I agree with him that there might be actual unicorns. But moving on from that, Eddie, you said Big Bang, and this is not picking on your use of terms in indicting time, because you quantified that. I'm fine with that. But time is relative to other things in existence. So right. you could never say, why didn't it happen 1 trillion years before that? It did.
Right. Well, that's why I was saying with
but
Kyle,
it happened when it happened, because that's when it had to happen.
Right. That's what I was saying with Kyle is it's talking about pre-temporality using temporal terms gets very, very confusing. But I never said anything about the Big Bang. I didn't say Big Bang.
No, that was the general topic. It's not that you said
No, I
something
said
about Big
the
Bang.
initial inflation.
Okay, well, that would be following the Big Bang. Yes. So, okay,
Well,
so
you were being
my memory is
pedantic,
not
so I felt like
perfectly
I
correct.
needed to be
Yeah, but just
pedantic.
for fun though.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is energy dependent upon? Existence. It's dependent upon existence. So if there's no existence, there can be no energy. So if there is a time before existence, there can't have been energy before existence. Let's see. The quantum field existed before existence. Well, then you're going to have to. But you did qualify, Kyle, that you're a subscriber to Multiverse. So so those are the
No,
general
I know.
problems I had with everything.
I am not a subscriber to Multiverse yet, anyway, unless you have
well,
like
then don't you
proper
have to
evidence
be?
for it. Pardon?
Shouldn't you be then?
Well,
If you're
the
going to
thing
say a
is, there
quantum
has been
field before
experiments.
this existence, then where was the quantum field located, or when was it located?
When was it located? Okay, that's a good question.
Okay.
Hmm.
Those were the problems I had.
Well, looks like atheism is destroyed. No, I'm kidding.
I wouldn't say that. But then I'm such a big heretic that many people think I'm an atheist. So there you go. Beat that, Eddie.
Just so I know, like everyone's position here. Can we all state what we believe? Just generally, like I'm an agnostic atheist. Richard, what do you? Yeah.
I think I can't put a label on what I am. That's actually a really large issue. If there weren't already a religion called Universalist, I would say I was a Universalist, but that one's been taken. And what I mean by that is if one doesn't neglect differences in societies and times, then they can read what is these more ancient religions and see that all of them have the exact same stories told in slightly different ways, which because some were separated by geography before they had a spoken language cannot have been borrowed. So to me, it looks like several occurrences of a singular idea too complex to be invented by the God maker, i.e. mankind. So that makes me a theist, amongst lots of other argument. As far as like my theory of truth or something like that, I know that I can't say that there is no truth because my statement would be false. So there must be some truth somewhere. I don't think I have much, or possibly I don't have any of it.
Seems like you've put an excellent amount of thought into your position.
I'm quite serious about these things.
Well, it shows.
I'm pretty much a fundamentalist in a certain way, but I would say I'm a reasonable one. I would say. So I believe the Bible. I'm a young Earth creationist. And so.
And
that's really interesting to me. Actually, I've never had the pleasure of speaking to someone who actually believes in young Earth. And no disrespect.
Ooh, he just called
Jamie,
you one of the few dumb idiots that live on this planet.
Oh,
likable and intelligent.
Hey, real quick, Richard. So
Sir.
my name on TikTok for a long time was Not a Real Christian. I'm quite often called an atheist, and even people gossip behind my back about being an atheist in disguise because of my positions. So yeah, you're gonna have to step your game up.
These are all the reasons why I want to have a long and devoted conversation with you, and have for some time. But now my work is such that I can't even offer a time frame.
Yeah, I'm with you. Me too, man. I know we've tried many a times, and
have at it, boys.
It's oh no, it ain't gonna happen tonight.
I have a burning question for Jamie.
Brew it up, Kyle.
Go ahead.
All right. So,
Bring it on. Bring it on.
have you ever heard of the heat problem?
Yeah.
You have? Oh, it's great. This will be easy then. So when you say young Earth creationists, do you say 6,000, 10,000?
I would subscribe to the biblical timeline taken straightforward, and so I would say, yeah, it's probably like 6,000, something like just over 6,000 years, probably.
Okay.
So it's not 6,000, but only 10 to 30 years, maybe, give or take 10 or 30 years. That's how literal I am.
It's
Yeah.
very
Yeah, it's
That's
okay.
very specific.
I don't mind if you think it's crazy, and you can ask me whatever questions you want.
No,
I know,
no, trust me.
know
I
about
have
the
talked
star-
to crazy people. You're not crazy.
I know about
But that wasn't even his question.
the starlight problem. Yeah, I'm aware of the heat problem. My answer. Do you want me to give you what I think it might be? The answer, or I can
Well,
offer.
just so we're on the same page, I'm talking about the heat problem of radioactive decay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
I believe the if the radio ratios of radiocarbon, or not carbon, but all the isotopes of heavy isotopes were created in a type of fission or a fusion event. Fusion event. I think that's something along those lines. I don't know a lot about it. I just know it's kind of like based off of a hydroplate theory. So I think that some sort of fusion happened and made super heavy isotopes, and they broke apart into the ratio we see today. So I don't deny that's fantastic, of course, of a claim. But I would say I don't deny. I don't think isochron dating and all the individual dating methods are incorrect. I don't think it's a conspiracy that they're really not measuring isotope ratios, and I don't think they're wrong about half-lives. I think that's really precise science. I just don't think the ratios are parent-daughter ratios are a result of regular time. I think they were produced in their form of ratios that largely what they sit like. If that makes any sense.
I'd like to paraphrase that, Kyle.
Go ahead,
if you wouldn't mind. How do we know that the parent isotope was or parent material was 100%? At any point, how do we? Are
you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I do not know.
Okay, so let's say that it started out at 25%, already daughter. Wouldn't that severely change the timelines?
Just to make sure that I'm following, we are talking about how if all the heavy isotopes of like uranium and everything are decaying, it releases heat, right?
Yes.
So even if we were to give it a margin of error of 10,000 degrees difference, the amount of heat given off by radioactive decay, according to several different calculations, shows that it's enough heat. If we're talking about a 6,000-year-old Earth, we have 6,000 years of radioactive decay, or pardon me, billions of years of radioactive decay crammed into 6,000 years. It would be enough heat.
In other words, this place would still be liquid.
The atmosphere would combust.
Yeah, it'd be a lot too much.
Now, again, that's even with a margin of error of say 10,000 degrees off.
Right.
So, how is that able to be reconciled?
That's ignoring my question.
Perhaps I didn't understand your question.
We've all already recognized everything you just reiterated, and I appreciate the reiteration. But what I actually asked is, what if it wouldn't be 6 billion years of decay? What if it were, well, in my example, 25% less, but let's say it was 99.99% daughter material at its inception when it became. What would that do to this?
Interesting. I haven't actually thought about that. That's good. It's a good thing to research.
Okay, it's just a thought. By the way, I'm not a young Earth creationist. I don't agree with Jamie at all.
Oh, no worries. I'm just
not everybody can be right. I know it's difficult. I don't expect you to be.
Hey, don't down yourself like that.
No. I can prove really quickly.
Yeah, I just did the same thing to you real quick there. That's what I did there.
Yeah, even quicker. Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
If I was wrong about something, I would notice it, and then I would change to the right thing, which I already did. So everything I believe
Let me
is
help you
obviously
notice.
right. It's so obviously. So I mean, I don't believe. What? Tell me which thing I believe that's wrong, and I'll show you why it's right. And so obviously, I'm right about everything. So there you go. If you want to be right,
if I
just
can
agree
help
with
you notice, I could help you notice why it's wrong.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
can't tell you that it's wrong, but I can help you notice, since you need
Okay.
to notice yourself. That is, i.e., be persuaded by your own mind, which is of course true.
Oh, that's right. You can be wrong. Okay. Well, now that we're all clear on that, I may be wrong about something. I just don't think so.
Nice
But,
switch.
yeah.
I like that. I like it a lot. But let's go on with it. Okay. If you work back the days of creation, you may notice that man is the newest arrival, right? And science agrees with that. And you might notice that the next newest arrival is modern animals, and science agrees with that. And before that, ancient animals, and science agrees with that. And before that, plants, and science agrees with that. And before that, really ancient plants, and science agrees with that. And before that, water, and science agrees with that. And let there be light, meaning refraction of light or general lighting of the area, atmosphere, and science agrees with that. So if it's true that the Bible is describing a process that we see in the crustal record, why would you be arguing with the crustal record?
Oh yeah, I'm aware of the it seems to match that idea, but there's other things going on there too. Like I think that's just a coincidence. Basically, I think although I understand why people would point to that, I would just say I'm not super fixed on it being like literal 24-hour periods, but I do think there's multiple things going on there, like the fact that the times and half the time relating to Christ's coming is kind of just like a general theme of 7, and he comes right in the middle of the time period. If you see
That's
that,
right, 3.5 of 7. That's exactly precisely correct.
Yeah, and then you see how the first half of the week it's like environment and maybe plants, and then the light comes, and then every day after that is swarming with living creatures. It crowned off by the marriage supper of the Lamb. It looks a lot like Adam and Eve. So I see that Jesus, the living creatures.
Real quick, did you say light came after plant life?
No, I'm saying in the narrative it's suggestive that the sun and moon are placed in the sky in a certain sense. I'm being really loose with the reading, but it does say the sun is appointed its time, for seasons in the sky, right? It appears on the 4th day, which correlates with Christ and the metaphors throughout the Bible. And so I'm saying my only point was just to point out after the light is given in the sky, it does mention there's light at the beginning, but then it's placed in the sky like at its appointed time.
Atmosphere.
And
atmosphere.
And then after that, the living creatures come, and that makes a lot of sense to me, like conceptually about the pinnacle of the week being the middle, the times and half. Yeah.
Kyle, much of the archaea or archaic single cell life forms that break down things in the most simple, fundamental ways, many of them are anaerobic. They couldn't handle having this atmosphere.
Right.
Oh, to answer your question more directly, Richard, I would just say this. It seems like the narrative is wanting to show a God working towards a plan. And you always start low and build up high. I think that's more likely of what's going on in the text, which happens to fit with logic, which makes a lot of sense as far as how it fits with the environment. I mean, it's no wonder that lesser able and simpler forms live in down low and in places where they don't need to move around a lot, and the more advanced creatures live up higher. So I mean, there's multiple reasons why that makes sense to me, is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Well, forgive me, gentlemen, but it is going on 12:30 a.m. my time, and I have been up since 5.
Yeah. Brute facts. He had to bounce as soon as the young Earth creation thing came up. Something suddenly came up. No, I'm just playing.
Well, it's been an invigorating conversation with the two of you. I actually would love to come back on at some point and just hang out and
anytime,
talk.
bro. Anytime.
Wonderful.
I do live streams all the time. You're welcome anytime.
Well, I am about to be subscribed.
Sweet. Yeah, and you're welcome anytime. And I like lots of views on here, so I'm not like pushing any particular agenda other than I think God exists. But and I like talking about theology and philosophy and science and whatever. So yeah, any topic. I love the diversity of topics. So yeah,
Hey,
hope to
there you
see
go.
you.
Sounds amazing. Well,
Nice to
Jamie,
almost talk
Richard,
to you, Kyle.
you guys have a wonderful evening.
Peace.
Okay, Richard.
Then there were two. So tell me, have you ever seen a crisp 50? That's a line from Caddyshack.
Oh yeah, I love that movie. I love Chevy Chase.
So tell me what is the difference between evidence and persuasion?
Evidence would be, I would say evidence is a more loose term that has more interpretation. And persuasion has to do with more of a sort of like a manipulation, but not in a bad connotation. Just like persuasion would be an act, and evidence would be a noun, something like that. I don't know. Or evidence would be data, and persuasion would be what's the word? Charismatics. I don't know.
What do you think is? No, I'm asking your opinion so I can understand you better.
Yeah.
Um,
Context would matter there, I think. But if you mean like convincing someone of something,
yes, of course.
in particular, like on this subject,
yes, like for instance, what would I have to present to persuade you that the Bible is not even suggesting a 6,000-year-old Earth?
I don't know.
I have something.
I mean, I know a lot of.
You'll find it persuasive, but it's a fact that it's evidence.
Richard, you know what I think, really though?
Really?
And it comes clear to me like recently on this. I think people choose what they want to believe, and then they find reasons to believe it.
That is often the case. I'd like to read to you a list of names. Now, lists of names and approximations of 20 years, which a generation is not 20 years because people could reproduce faster than that on average. In fact, really, in that day and age, it probably should have been 16, not 20. But they used 20. Not really sure why. Maybe you should go to a 4,500-year-old Earth. That would be probably more accurate. But
depends what you're evaluating, I guess.
This is one of those lists of names that were like the ones used to mathematically summate the age of the Earth in lineages in the Bible. And this is a list of lineages. I chose a really, really long list, which those lists are not long that were used. This is 1 Chronicles 6, 1 verses 1 through 53. So 53 verses. So it's rather lengthy lineage, you see. Now, I have injected some English into it using as little as possible. But to read this to you, and I think you're bright enough, that although it'll sound a little bit chunky, you will pick up on context after a while and not need the conjunctions that were actually not there in the modern English, unlike the Hebrew, where they just said things a lot and people picked up on context over time. So I'm going to read you a list of definitions of these names. Have you ever heard me do this?
I thought you did it with me first.
I don't know. Do you recall me? You recall me reading this to you?
Yeah, because we talked about this sort of thing, and then the next time I saw you, you showed me this list of names.
Well, I've spoken to this about to a lot of people, so I can't recall who I have.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's fine. Yeah. No, I would want you to read them anyway.
And you'll forgive me. You want me to read it anyway?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't remember exactly what the message was, but I'm familiar with this sort of thing, and we have talked about it. That's all I meant to say. But it wouldn't, even if I did remember it perfectly, I'd want you to read it again.
Okay. First Chronicles 6, 1 through 53. United refugee, ally bitter, ally high people, anointing seat of association, strength of God, high people, wish of God drawing out rebelliously, wish of God and volunteer worshiper, God helper, high desirable place, God helper, mouth of a serpent, father of plenty, depopulate forcefully, Jah has risen rebellious, Jah has said, brother of goodness, just brother of anger. Jah has helped. Jehovah favored. Jah has helped. Jah has said, brother of goodness, just retribution, portion of Jah. Jah has helped. Jah has prevailed. Jehovah has righted. Jehovah has righted. Went when the Lord carried away, celebrated and founded peaceful by the
Pause.
hand of the great stone.
Pause. That sounds like so far. It sounds like you're right at the end of the third rent going through of the history. Essentially, that's how that was in
That's
the
what
third.
this is.
That was the third. You were getting just if either you hit. Is that it?
No, that's not the end of it.
So that sounds like you're in the very tail end of the third going through and starting over of history and how it ends.
Yeah, yes, this is the history of the planet. This is all of it. In fact, this is the existence of this planet, all of it. By the time you get to the end.
I mean, do you agree with me that it went through the cycle like 3 times there? That's what it sounded like to me.
Oh yes, it does repeat 3 times. That so does lots of stuff in the Bible. Unite refugee, ally bitter, refugee, white famous ally, high people, anointing seat of association, strength of God, bitter, sick, sensitive, to be united, refugee, white, unity with a plan, Jehovah brothered, timely rising of light, stepping forward, ally, people of liberality, made smooth of a prisoner, God has obtained, father of gathering, prisoner the bottom, flame of God, strength of God asked, God has obtained, burdensome brother of death has obtained. Has been obtained. God has obtained honeycomb, given. God of our fathers, compassionate. God has obtained him heard of God. A boy and father worshiper of Jah, for bitter and sick, white famous strength, annunciation, festival of Jah, Jah has made. Whom God loving set over service, song in the house of the Lord, heaven had rest, ministered before dwelling place, tabernacle of the congregation, singing, peaceful, built the house of the Lord, founded peaceful, waiting office according to order, these that waited their children, the ones who are allied, faithful a singer, the son of Jehovah God, the son of him heard of God, God has obtained compassionate, God of his God, humble honeycomb, God has obtained erasure for burdensome, God has obtained, Jehovah is his God, Jah has helped, Jah has secreted away, depressed prisoner, father of gathering made smooth, oil of light, ally to unite, he will rule as God, his brother, collector who stood on his right hand, collector at the knee of Jah, annunciation who like God, in work of Jah, king from Jah, munificence and a rising of light, Jah has adorned permanent plan, famous unity, refugee to unite, brethren of the bitter on the left hand, permanently bowed, service, regnant jaw has regarded, strength of jaw, built, preserved, sick, sensitive, bitter to unite, brethren to unite, appointed unto all manner, service, service Christ, heaven of God, brother, him drawn out, sons offered upon altar, burnt offering on altar of incense, work of the most holy, make an atonement, he will rule, according drawing out, servant of God, commanded, sons of brother, drawing out, God helper, against mouth of a serpent, father of plenty depopulates, forcefully, Jah has risen rebellious, Jah has said, just brother of anger. That's the end of it.
You have to send me that list.
Yeah, it's a bunch of work. I'll just send it to you.
What was the last 4 or 5 there?
Okay.
Can you read that again?
I'd already closed it, but I'll find it again. It's not hard to find.
Something like depopulate something, brother.
It's always depopulate forcefully.
Sounds like Jeremiah 4.
It's going to sound a lot like Jeremiah. It's also going to sound a lot like Isaiah and Daniel.
Isaiah, yeah. Isaiah.
Son of brother drawing out, God helper, against mouth of a serpent, father of plenty to depopulate forcefully, Jah has risen rebellious, Jah has said just brother of anger.
Sounds like the resurrection of the wicked or something. I don't know. I'll have to look at that. Is that all the names in Chronicles you said? First Kings or something?
That is a list of names, First Chronicles 6, 1 through 53.
That's all in just that one chapter?
Yeah.
One chapter. Cool.
Yeah, it's all one chapter.
Who is forcefully depopulated? Which name is that?
We are forcefully depopulated. What were the actual original? What are the names?
What was the name for that one? I'm wondering.
I don't know. The only one I remember would be an awful name to name your child. It's Phinehas, which means mouth of a serpent.
What about let's see, the one where it said like, is there a Michael in there?
Him like God.
Yeah,
there is something that was like him like God, but it's not Michael. But it's close. You were close.
Michiel or something like weird.
Yeah, in English we would almost say Michelle.
Yeah, cool.
I think there was a Michelle. Well, it's just a list of names. I mean, I can read it with some interjections. United by a refugee, an ally to the bitter, an ally to the high people, the anointing seat of association. You just throw a "the" and a "to" in there every once in a while, and it's really easy.
Yeah, there's some. I just want to see it because I want to see if there's any. I don't have a problem with as far as I can tell, I don't have any problems with your translation. I'm just curious to see what kind of, because there's usually a little bit of, a leniency in how you could maybe render it. I think. Don't you think? Or not?
Yeah, that's why it's choppy, because I just took the literal translations.
Yeah. That's understandable. I don't think I've shown you this. It's a similar thing here. Let me see if I can just real quick, for the audience sake, anyways, at least.
Oh, that's right. We did talk about this, and then you sent me a video of a guy who was talking about these sorts of things, and then I claimed that he's not talking about this same thing.
Well, it's the same kind of idea.
Now I remember. It's basically the same kind of idea, yeah.
Because what's fascinating about this one is he's let's see, trying to find it real quick. No, I can't find it. Hold on.
The work of John the Baptist.
Do you think
Elijah that we were talking?
Do I think what? You are muted right now if you're talking. Jamie, you are muted.
Okay, here we go.
Hebrews chapter 11,
Just
verse
for fun,
15.
just real quick. If you just
Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God.
let's see if
He has prepared for them a city.
I love showing people this, so I know you've seen it,
Early
but
music just before this broadcast, though. Holy city.
I might have gone too far already. Hold on. Damn it.
Yep, that's the guy.
It's not on politics. It's not going to be on trying to appease and sacrifice who are doing.
Where is it? Oh well.
There's going to be two groups when Jesus comes. One group's going to have their father's name in their forehead.
There it is.
We're getting an echo through your mic, though. You should be informed.
I'll shut it off.
Many who are named in the list in Revelation, they're carried off to Assyria. You can read it right there. Jot it down. 2 Kings.
You can critique it
chapter 7,
afterwards.
verse 6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria. That was the capital of the northern 10 tribes. He took the capital city and carried Israel away into Assyria. The Jews from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi did come back from the Babylonian captivity. There was never an exodus from Assyria back to Israel. Most of those tribes from the 10 tribes were absorbed and intermarried, and they lost their distinct identity. I venture to say you're not going to find anyone on the face of the earth that is a pure blood descendant from Issachar, Manasseh, Zebulun, Naphtali, or any of those tribes. Matter of fact, I'd venture to guess if you could do DNA work, you'd find you all got a little bit of Jew in you too. That's where you get the word wandering Jew. They're all over the world. So it works either way. I mean, if you're going to say, well, but they got a little bit of Manasseh in them somewhere, that would include almost everybody at this point, right? It tells us that they've got special names. Now, why did God specifically mention those names? I did a study, and when I got done with the study, I shouted hallelujah and eureka, because I thought I had found something new that nobody else knew. It's fun when in your Bible study you say, God's revealed something to me, and ultimately, I remember the words of Solomon, there's nothing new under the sun. Someone else says, yeah, he showed it to me too, 20 years ago. You take the names, and I realize this is a small font, but Cheryl did a good job of getting this all on one slide. Hold that there for just a second. These are the names, the way they appear, with the meanings of the names. I wanted to do a study of what the meanings of the names are. You find it right in the Bible, because when these boys were being named, Rachel and Leah, two sisters, were kind of at odds with each other. They were going through this struggle. They gave them unique names. Judah means, I will praise the Lord. Why is he first? He's not the firstborn. Reuben was the firstborn, but he's second. It means he has looked on me. Gad means given good fortune. Asher, happy am I. Naphtali, my wrestling. Manasseh, making me to forget. Simeon, God hears me. Levi, attached or joined to me. Issachar, purchased me. Zebulun, dwelling. Joseph, God will add to me. Benjamin, son of his right hand. Now, I took that, and when you go from one language to another, sometimes there's little variations in the translation, and you got to make something flow, sometimes you got to put in a word like the or and. And I put all the names together, the way they appear, in the order they appear, which is not the order they are born in, and nowhere else in the Bible is it found in that order. And John the Apostle knew the right order. You can bet on that. Every Jew knew the order of the tribes. Here's what it says when you line them up the way they appear in Revelation.
Actually, it's what it reads.
I will praise the Lord, for he has looked on me. Anything you see in brackets, I added. I'm just being fair. And granted or given good fortune. I am happy because my wrestling God is making me to forget. God hears me and is attached or joined to me. He has purchased me a dwelling and will add to me the son of his right hand. That's phenomenal when you think about it. That's the story of salvation. My wrestlings, he is making me to forget. It's talking about the marriage supper of the Lamb. It's all given in the context of a Jewish wedding. And by the way, Jesus in his statement, I go to prepare a place for you, and I will come again and receive you unto myself. That's in the context of a Jewish wedding. He's coming for his bride. A Jewish boy, when he had a wedding arranged, he'd go build a honeymoon chamber, and he'd come back and get his bride. And don't forget this. Can you imagine a Jewish groom who goes and he would build this honeymoon chamber?
Sorry, he doesn't sneak his bride there early. Sorry, guys. That's what I'd say.
So here's something I have a bit of an issue with. If you translate the word Hoshea, or Hosea, however you want to say it, it's to be saved or salvation. Now, tell me, just what God-fearing Jew would name their child Salvation? You can't do that. That makes them the Messiah. So why is this character named Hoshea?
I didn't see it. Like Hosea?
He didn't translate that one.
Oh, I didn't see it. I didn't look. I'll have to look at it.
Yeah, he started after that.
I'll have to look at that. You're saying
Now,
what?
I don't know if he just missed it.
Well, Yeshua means Yeshua.
Not.
Yeshua is
Jehovah saves.
So say, I mean, it must have a slight varied connotation with different letters. I don't know. Maybe it changes it.
No, I just looked it up.
Okay.
It's Hebrew 3467.
Okay, I'll look it up too.
Hoshea, if you pronounced it horribly, but in English, so you can spell it. It means salvation. Specifically, the root of that word is to be saved.
Was it Hosea? The name Hosea?
I'm saying it Hoshea so you can spell it.
Okay.
If you wanted to pronounce it correctly, it wouldn't be anything close to that.
Let's see. Right, look at my Brown Driver Briggs. Let's see.
Jamie, are you aware you put the StreamYard link in the private chat?
No. It was an accident. I was putting it in the regular comments before, but it's pinned. I made sure it was pinned, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, I just want to make sure it did make it.
Why don't you just share whatever you're talking about? Because I'm having trouble with my. Let's see. Using my.
Well, my point is, you wouldn't name your child Jesus Christ of God if you were a Jew. Now,
are we talking about the thing we just watched, or just in general? You're just speaking in general.
He said the name of the book that story that he drew from was contained in was Hosea or Hosea or Hoshea or.
Well, that was all from that was from Revelation like 11, I thought, or 14 or something.
Okay, so he mentioned the name Hoshea. If you look that up, that means to be saved. Derivative word Hoshea, salvation.
Okay.
Does it make sense? Do you understand why I'm objecting to a Jewish couple naming their child salvation?
Yeah.
Because there's no way in hell they'd ever do that.
I'm not sure how they spell it Yeshua, but I know that means the God's salvation. So could there be a different context with the other?
Well, it doesn't mean the God is salvation. It means Jehovah's salvation, specifically.
Yeah, because it's Yah, right? Yah or Jah.
Right, exactly. Yah, which is a pet name of the Jews for Jehovah. It's a shortened form of Jehovah.
Right. So some of it's Hoshea. So let's see. Yeah. Generally uses a boy's name. 6 letters, 3 syllables, pronounced Hoshea. And let's look at the Bible dictionary and see what it has to say. Well, it's in 1 Chronicles 27, original name of the son of Nun, afterwards called Joshua. So it's literally the name that Yeshua comes out of.
It means Jesus, that's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Joshua's name has the same name, and he was after Moses. But Jesus is supposed to be the prophet like Moses, yet the one. So I mean, you could think about it like this is how I would think about it, or things that come to mind. So, well, wait, Jesus is supposed to be the prophet like Moses, because he literally says, "Look for a prophet that's like Moses." And then you go like, or people get all caught up with like Jesus being a prince. There's other princes, so it's like, no, you're missing the point. That's not how they thought about it. They thought about it like he could be a prince unto God, like you could call him a king because when he's as a man, he's a king. It's like, don't get caught up like, oh, well, that can't be Jesus because it's a prince. It's like, no, that's not the point. Oh, but Satan's called a prince too, and so it's like, no, it's just missing the point.
Those are the slave arguments, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I guess. So it's being overly worried about stupid things that you're missing what they were actually thinking and what the context was. So I would say, it's like, well, Joshua is the same name of Jesus, but I thought Jesus was supposed to be, well, you could look at it like, well, yeah, one part of the typology is he's going to be like Moses. There's like a son was like the father. And so it's emphasizing that idea. And you could say, well, we know Jesus is going to be the prophet that comes after Moses, and the next guy who comes after Moses, not to say it is him, but he has the same name as him because he comes after. I mean, there's like ways you can make it work, or
Okay, so let's grant that God knows all things throughout time. Okay, so God would know what to name the child, so that when they reach the high point of their life, which becomes a biblical story, that they will have the correct name. So he waits while they're still pregnant before the baby's named, or however that tradition works in that part of the world. He waits for them to pray, and then he punches them in the head and say, name it this. And 100% of the people, without skipping a generation ever, in what are sometimes very long lists of names, all prayed perfectly, followed that commandment, and no one ever declined or failed.
I would say some of them probably had to have multiple opportunities. And as far as naming them, I would say he may have set it up in such a way where there was something going on when they were pregnant or about to name the child, so that they had another reason to call the baby that, which ends up being also like
you wouldn't name your child Mouth of a Serpent. I'm sorry, you just wouldn't.
Well, I can imagine a reason you might think they were about
really
they were surrounded. Well, depends on how you think of it. Like you're not worried about because of what was happening at that point in that time in your life, and you're commemorating that notion of what happened then, and by their birth being a like a beacon of that time, something like that.
No,
not because
they always made complimentary names. And
I heard the guy called his kid Shitbird because not because he thought the baby was.
I guess a boy named Sue, but I don't think that. I don't think that's realistic.
Whatever, man. I'm just spitballing.
Yeah, I'm just saying. In order for that to work, there had to be, first of all, there had to be born first a male every generation. That's impossible.
I repent.
Second, all of them had to pray perfectly. I don't find that reasonable. Thirdly, these are multipliers. These are multipliers, by the way. And then everyone had to conform without skipping. I don't buy that.
I think you're constraining it too much. Their lives. I mean, maybe
those were all logical necessities. What do you mean I'm constraining it too much?
Well, I mean, it's not like that's the only thing they did in their life that makes their name look like them. I mean their name be like Yared, Jared. Yared. It means shall come down. Like
okay.
And then fallen angels come later in his life, presumably. And it was in the time of Jared is when the angels came down on the mountain.
Yes.
But that didn't happen when he was born. So
right.
Yeah, God,
so then
God
your explanation of it, you're defeating right now.
Oh, why?
You said might have been commemorating an event at their birth. That's what you said.
Yeah, but his name doesn't mean has to come down on the 66th year in the second month of the third day.
That'd be a really long name.
Yeah, right. So I'm just saying, it's not like there was one shot at it to make his name make sense.
That name Yared meant what?
Shall come down.
Shall come down.
Yeah.
And who was born before them in that family?
That's the best one.
I will see angels.
No, it's Mahalalel, the blessed God. Mahalalel.
The blessed God shall come down. Really?
Yeah. And then it's Enoch. They don't know what that name means.
Which means? Oh, we don't have a
People
translation.
say teaching or preaching or teaching, but they're not sure.
Yeah. That's all about the same thing.
That at his death is Methuselah, the next one. At his death. At his death it comes.
Come on.
At his death it comes.
You're like showing my point. Now you may not agree with me, but these are
no. I'm telling you, this is true. This is true.
They're under their own. It's just that they are under translated. That's all.
Yeah, dude, think about it.
They should be sentences.
They
shouldn't be a list of names.
Have you not heard this, Richard? A man appointed mortal sorrow at his the blessed God shall come down. Teaching, maybe that's the right one.
I've not done that one, and I don't listen to people talk about this stuff.
At his death shall bring the despairing rest. No,
I want there to be only prayer influencing me. I only go on shows like this. I don't listen to the pros.
Well, okay, fine.
Reputation.
Well, just let me tell you one thing about it, though, and it's not to do with the name
Sure,
it's
go ahead.
translated. But okay, yeah, you do it independently. But look, Methuselah, if you do that math, okay, it says Lamech. Methuselah has Lamech, and then Lamech has Noah. Okay, and it says when Methuselah was 187, he has Lamech. Okay, Lamech has Noah when he's 182. Okay, right? Add those two together, you have 369. So when Methuselah is 369, Noah is born to Lamech.
Right.
And then the flood narrative says this: in the seventh month or whatever, whatever day in the 17th month or the seventh month, in the 600th year, in the 600th year of Noah, the fountains of the great deep broke open.
Yes.
So the flood began in his 600th year. What's 600 plus 369? Or 187, 182 plus 600 is 969. Who was the oldest man that ever lived? Methuselah. How old was he when he died? 969. What does his name mean when you use three roots? At his death, it comes.
Right.
He died the year the flood came.
Right. It's too much to be coincidental, and it would require everybody did it.
Yeah, exactly. And look, when Peter's in 2 Peter, when Peter's saying, when he's talking about the world that then was flooded, overflowed with water, and is now reserved, for the day of ungodly men or whatever, men of perdition, like the judgment. He says, God's not willing. God is long suffering, not willing that any should perish, but whatever was long suffering.
It means His will not be completely fulfilled.
Yeah, but think about it. He's in the context of Genesis 5 and 6 right there. Talking about the flood and the creation, so he's clearly thinking Genesis, because the creation's right before that in the text. And then he's talking about the flood and how there was a judgment, but don't think God is slack concerning his promises, like some count slackness, but is long suffering towards usward, not wishing that any should perish. In that same world that was made out of water was overflowed with water. So he's literally, what was he thinking? I think he was thinking Methuselah. God afforded Methuselah more years than any other man, that is 969, and his name meant that he would not send a judgment until Methuselah had died. And he was long suffering because he afforded Methuselah that many years, more than any other man that ever lived, before he sent the flood. Right. So that's the context. I tell people that, they think I'm crazy. I'm going, dude, it can't not be that.
It is that. It is. And by the way, died, it actually means moving on to a different thing. It doesn't mean end of life. Just by the way.
Which part?
When you say like Methuselah died, that word died there is not necessarily the end of physical flesh and death.
Well, in that genealogy,
something else.
Okay, that's fine. Well, it says, the idea is like that gives the end of their life, or however you want to say it. But it's
not necessarily.
I would say it gives you the age they are when they have their son, and then it gives you the age when they cease or whatever. All
I can say is it's a paradigm shift. I can't say what the paradigm shift is. You can't tell.
That might be reasonable, but the point is that's a pretty good way to figure out dates. When you giving if I want there's a lot of information you get by doing that. It makes a succession of people, and you know how old they are when they died, so you know how old the one before that was when the next son was born. I don't think that's a coincidence that we see that pattern there with Methuselah. By the way, you can translate Noah's rest or comfort.
What's that?
Noah's rest means rest or comfort.
Right. He's the giver of rest or the giver of comfort. That's what his name means.
Yep. It's hard to translate, though, the first three names, and then a couple in there are a little difficult. And if you look at what the scholars say...
Not if you look for continuous context, it's not hard at all.
Let's put it this: the root of Methuselah has to be three roots. If you look up all the different ways they've translated all the scholarship, they only go down to two roots. So the reason it's not going to say what you need it to say is because they presume it's two roots, and there's reasons for that. But if you do it from three roots, it's difficult too, because there's It looks like two.
I think it's Mashuthael.
Yeah,
Methuselah is like horrible spelling.
Yeah, it's like Selah, K, and it's like Moot or Muth, which is like death, and then.
Right.
But if you break it down to 3, you get what I said.
Right.
And none of the scholars did that. They'll say man of the dart, man of war, man of something else. One other weird, strange one somebody comes up with, because there's the roots can be many different things, and so there's like indicators of how it's likely to be understood. But they don't even really know exactly for sure how names were meant to be used, and so that's why
how did you translate it?
Man of the dart, man of war.
Oh, that's what I got. Man of the dart. I can show you that in writing.
Man of the spear.
Yeah, dart or spear. Yeah, right. That's what I got.
Yeah. That's 2 roots though. You got to go break it down more. I think you have to break down.
Have to look into it. I thought.
Yeah.
I don't know.
See
I
what you
do not right now know that you can go to 3 roots.
Okay. Yeah. See what you find. I'm gonna shut it down, man. I'm gonna eat, and I gotta work tomorrow. I'm going back to work.
You haven't eaten yet today.
Not dinner.
Dude, go eat.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for letting me on your show.
Good times, man. See you next time.
Have peace.
Peace. If you've been out there the whole time, I especially am talking to you. I love you. Thank you. God bless.